Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a journey, really, into a key period, 1450 to 1750.
Right.
We're looking at how major belief systems, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Sikhism, went through some really big changes.
Absolutely. And this isn't just, dry history. It's about understanding the forces, the shifts in belief that literally shaped the world back then.
Yeah, how people saw the divine, how that changed things on the ground. We'll be digging into historical analysis, looking at the sources from the era.
And our mission, if you like, is to pull out the key continuities, what stayed the same, and the big changes. And crucially, understand their impact. Why did it matter?
Okay, great. Let's dive in. Christianity in Europe seems like the place to start.
Makes sense.
For centuries, it was this huge unifying cultural force, wasn't it? Even though, as we know, it had already split between Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic much earlier.
That's right. And by around 1500, the Catholic Church, particularly in Western Europe, held enormous power. Not just spiritual, but, well, temporal power too. Lots of land, lots of wealth.
And you saw this power expressed in massive projects like rebuilding St. Peter's Basilica in Rome.
Exactly. But huge projects need huge amounts of money. And the way they raised it, well, that became a major point of contention.
Yeah, controversial is putting it mildly. We're talking about the sale of indulgences.
Paying money for essentially forgiveness of sins, or at least time off purgatory.
And alongside that, you had simony the selling of church positions, bishoprics, abbacies, things like that.
You could buy your way into powerful roles. You can imagine how that might undermine people's faith in the institution.
Definitely erodes trust. And this is where Martin Luther enters the picture, right?
Yes, and what's key about Luther is that he was inside the system, a Catholic monk, a scholar, deeply immersed in the Bible.
So he wasn't an outsider throwing stones.
Not at all. His intense study led him to believe that these practices, indulgences, simony, they just weren't supported by Scripture. He couldn't find the justification there.
So based on that conviction, he writes up his objections, the famous 95 Theses.
95 points for academic debate, technically. The story goes he nailed them to the church door in Wittenberg, a public challenge.
And the church's reaction? Predictable, perhaps?
Well, they saw it as a direct attack on their authority. Luther was branded a heretic,
Yeah.
eventually excommunicated.
But here's the thing. There had been reformers before, people critical of the church. Why did Luther's movement take off in such a massive way?
Technology. The printing press. That was the absolute game changer.
Right. Suddenly his writings, his arguments, they weren't just being discussed locally.
Exactly. They could be printed quickly, cheaply, and spread like wildfire across Europe. Before the printing press, ideas just couldn't travel that fast or reach so many people.
So it empowered individuals, gave them access to his ideas directly, bypassing the church hierarchy to some extent.
Precisely. It fueled this groundswell of support among people who already had grievances or agreed with his theological points. It changed the whole dynamic of religious information.
Now, the Catholic Church didn't just sit back and watch this happen, did they? They launched their own response.
No, they certainly didn't ignore it. They recognized, perhaps belatedly, that some of the criticisms had merit, especially around corruption. This led to the Catholic Reformation, or Counter-Reformation.
Yeah, and the Council of Trent was central to that.
Very central. It lasted on and off for years. And what came out of Trent is fascinating because it shows both change and continuity.
Okay, also.
Well, on the change side, they did clean house to some extent. They banned the worst of the financial abuses, the sale of indulgences, simony. Those were officially out.
So they addressed some of Luther's key complaints.
They did. But, and this is the continuity part, they doubled down on core Catholic doctrines that Luther had challenged.
The stress.
Things like salvation through both faith and good works, not faith alone as Luther argued. The authority of church tradition alongside the Bible. They firmly rejected Luther's main theological shifts.
So no reconciliation. Instead, this cemented the split.
Absolutely. It drew the lines very clearly. And this religious division had massive political fallout across Europe.
Rulers started choosing sides, Catholic or Protestant.
And often imposing their choice on their populations, which led, tragically, to decades, even centuries in some places, of religious wars.
Right up until the mid-17th century, like the 30 Years' War ending in 1648. A hugely destructive period.
It really reshaped the continent, which makes you wonder, were similar things happening elsewhere? What about the big Islamic empires?
Good question. Let's shift focus to the Middle East, specifically the Ottoman and Safavid empires.
Two major powers in the region during this period.
And Islam, like Christianity, had its own major, much earlier split. the Sunni-Shia division dating back to the 7th century.
Right, the core disagreement over who should succeed the Prophet Muhammad. Should it be a blood relative, which is the Shia view, or the most qualified leader, the Sunni perspective?
And this wasn't just an ancient theological point by 1450. It was deeply relevant to these empires.
Very much so. The Safavid Empire, centered in Persia, what's now Iran, was staunchly Shia.
While the Ottomans, controlling Anatolia, the Balkans, North Africa, the Levant, they were Sunni.
And this difference wasn't just incidental. It fueled a major political and military rivalry. They were constantly competing for territory, for influence.
So the religious difference mapped onto a geopolitical conflict.
Exactly. Their wars and competition weren't just about land or resources. They were also framed in terms of this Sunni-Shia divide. Each saw the other as, well, religiously incorrect, even heretical.
Who generally came out on top in this rivalry?
Militarily and territorially, the Ottomans generally had the upper hand during this period. But the key takeaway for us is how this political conflict intensified the Sunni-Shia split.
It wasn't just theology anymore. It was tied up with imperial identity, loyalty, power politics.
Precisely. It hardened those identities
Yeah.
and made the division even more significant across the wider Islamic world.
Okay, so we've seen fragmentation in Christianity, intensified division in Islam. What about South Asia? A different picture there.
A different dynamic, certainly. You had a long-established situation of mostly Muslim rulers governing a largely Hindu population, particularly under the Mughal Empire for much of this period.
And that interaction led to some interesting developments, didn't it? New movements emerging.
Yes, particularly movements that seemed to try and bridge the gap or find common ground between Hinduism and Islam.
Like the Bhakti movement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, Bhakti devotionalism had roots deep within Hinduism, going back centuries, emphasizing a personal, loving connection to deities.
But during our period, 1450, 1750, something shifts.
We see increased interaction, a kind of blending with Sufism.
The mystical branch of Islam.
Right. Both Bhakti and Sufism emphasize direct personal experience of the divine, often through things like devotional singing, poetry. There was a shared mystical sensibility.
So they found common ground. And then there's Sikhism.
Which is particularly interesting because it emerges as a completely new belief system, explicitly drawing from both traditions.
How did it blend them?
Well, you see it in core beliefs. The Sikh concept of one God, Ekankar, resonates strongly with Islamic monotheism.
Okay.
But it also incorporates the Hindu idea of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and reincarnation.
So a real synthesis. But it wasn't just combining things, was it? It also rejected certain aspects.
Crucially, yes. Sikhism explicitly rejected the Hindu caste system, advocating for social equality. It also challenged traditional gender hierarchies found in both societies at the time.
So it was building something new by drawing on existing traditions, but also making a deliberate break with some established social norms.
A fascinating example of religious innovation in a context of interaction.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. We've covered quite a bit of ground.
We have. We've seen the shattering of Christian unity in Europe.
The deepening of the Sunni-Shia divide in the Middle East, really fueled by imperial politics.
And then in South Asia, the rise of these syncretic movements, Bhakti evolving, Sikhism emerging, trying to bridge differences or create something new altogether.
I think the big takeaway, the aha moment maybe, is seeing how interconnected everything was. Religious change wasn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. It was tangled up with politics, with power, with technology like the printing press, cultural exchange, internal reform efforts. It's complex.
Understanding that web of connections really helps make sense of this whole early modern period, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And for you listening, grasping these patterns, how beliefs changed, how they stayed the same, and why, gives you a much richer framework for understanding not just this era, but how the world developed afterwards.
It lays the groundwork for so much that came later: conflicts, alliances, cultural shifts, even things we see today.
Which leads to a final thought, perhaps.
Go for it.
How do these dynamics, continuity, and change within belief systems, the interplay with politics and society, how do they continue to shape our world now?
Thinking about the echoes of 1450 to 1750 today, that's definitely something to mull over. It shows these historical shifts have really long legacies.